Hello, and welcome to Etcher Studio. My name is Janet, and I'm your host for today's live demo. We are here with artist Lilly Carr, who will be showing us how to paint a mountain scene in gouache. Everyone, please welcome Lilly.
Hi, everybody. Today I'm going to teach you how to paint a mountain scene in gouache, and I'm going to focus on creating layers and how to effectively create light and shadow. So I'll show you a few examples of my work here. This is the original painting. Here's a couple more. And then in my mini workshop in a few weeks, I'm going to be teaching something pretty similar, another type of mountain scene, but this time instead of something from the Southwest, the painting I'll be doing today is from Colorado. I'll be teaching a scene from the Blue Ridge Mountains, so with sort of softer tones, more foliage, and here I'll also focus on creating light and shadow and how to create the effect of distance in your paintings.
Excellent. And I will put the link for that in the chat. Your mini workshop is on Sunday, October 9th at 2 p.m. Eastern.
Yes.
And here's the link.
All right. Okay, so to get started on this, first I've got on my palette here, I've got Prussian blue, which is the main color I'm going to be using today. I've got some black and a little bit of ultramarine and then a lot of white. So I'm going to start by taking Prussian blue and mixing in some water and adding just a little bit of black so we get kind of a dark color here. Not quite black, but pretty dark. And then, like you can see on my sketch here, I've got the lines started. And I'm just going to start by outlining all of these so I have a clearer idea of what I'm going to be working on. And I'm using my size 4 liner brush from Etcher here, so it's good for fine details. Yeah, so I'm just going to start sweeping the color in on the top of the mountains. That's looking a little dark for what I'd like, so I'm going to add in a little more blue, less black. And then, yeah, so I'm just going to do this around the edges that I've sketched out. And so this will create kind of a clearer sense of where the ridges are and where I'm ultimately going to be placing shadow. Okay. So at this step, we don't have to be super exact because, again, I'm going to be putting more paint on here in a few minutes. All right.
What kind of consistency is your paint right now?
Right now, I'm keeping it pretty watery. My favorite thing about gouache is its ability to act like so many different kinds of paint. So when I painted the sky in, I kept it pretty thick, and same here. But right now for this, like when I'm painting the actual mountain parts, I like to keep it kind of thin, kind of like watercolor, because I feel that when it's thinner like that, and you can see kind of the other colors showing through, it sort of, to me, looks more accurate to like how a mountain would actually look, because it's let some of the light and the shadow come through. Because, you know, when you're looking at a mountain, like the shadows aren't opaque, they're transparent, and you can still sort of see what's underneath. So right now, like you can see, I have it pretty watery. So the next thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to keep on with that same mix of black and Prussian blue and make a pretty dark color here. And then I'm going to start blocking in this section of the mountain on top. Just really quick, going to come through and sort of sweep it in. And I'm going to leave a little bit at the bottom here where I'm not going to fill in, because later I'm going to add in some light blue to give it sort of a snowy effect there.
And we did have a question. Beth would like to know, where did you say this photo reference was taken?
This photo reference is in Colorado. I took it a couple months ago, back, I guess, in March or February at a place called Monte Vista National Wildlife Reserve, or Refuge, maybe. Yeah, and it's super beautiful there. It's in the San Luis Valley of Colorado, which I think is the highest and largest alpine valley in the world. And it's a bird refuge. They've got some artificial like wetlands there where a lot of migratory birds stop there. So when I was there, I saw maybe 500 sandhill cranes, which was really special. So now I'm mixing in a little bit of white. So we're gonna kind of make a lighter color where I'm gonna start blocking in some stuff. I don't want it to be too light right now because these parts are still gonna be in shadow. So I'm gonna add a little bit of black there so we get kind of a grayish color. And then I'm gonna start blocking in these mountains on the side here. So when I'm painting, I usually like to start by just blocking in the sort of bigger expanses and then coming back in later and adding fine details on top. That's another thing that I really like about gouache is you can just keep layering and layering it. You can go dark to light, light to dark, really whatever. So I love the flexibility that comes with it. Okay, and then I'm gonna come back to my darker color again and start filling in these parts. This one I want to be even darker than this to create sort of the effect of like deep shadow back here. And I'm gonna take and sort of sweep it up so my brush strokes follow the shape of the mountain because I want this to be sort of like a little gully here. Like you can see kind of over in this one, I've got the snow coming down. Okay. Not quite dark enough for how I want it. A little bit more black. But yeah, I was living in Colorado. I was out there house sitting for about 8 months, sort of in a very rural area. And I woke up every morning to the mountains outside and I just loved it. And I got so much inspiration for painting out there because, I could just wake up and look out the window and it was like the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. So I've been painting a lot of mountain scenes since then. Okay, so next I'm going to come back to an even lighter color and I'm going to start working on the hills in the front here. And I want these hills to be pretty snowy. So I'm going to mix up kind of a light blue color here, just a lot of white and a tiny bit of Prussian blue. When I paint snow, even though, snow is white, I don't really like to paint it as pure white because I feel like, when you do it sort of like this, and then you have a darker color under, and then you can go in and put some pure white on top, but it adds like a nice contrast, I think. And also when I'm painting mountains, like even though I know in my head, snow by itself is white, I also try to take into consideration the way that the light plays into it and shadow and kind of how the colors work together and in relationship with one another. So like once we've got it all blocked in, even though this is light blue, it'll kind of give the effect still that it's snowy. So now I'm going to block in some more. The hills behind here, I'm going to keep kind of light, maybe somewhere in the middle like this. And just sweep the color on pretty fast. The consistency of my paint now is a bit thicker than I had it earlier, but again, I like to use quite a lot of water when I'm painting mountains. The part where maybe I wouldn't mix in as much water, like on this part you can see up here, for the snow at the end when I put that in, so it looks nice and thick, but generally I like it to be pretty watery. I'm gonna just sweep some of this in on this ridge. Let's see, kind of another middle color here. All right, and then we've just got this one little part here left to block in. This down here for now, I am gonna leave white, and I'm gonna fix up some of the details here before I put in the light blue. In this area, I'm gonna leave pretty snowy, so it sort of like gives the effect of the snow gathering at the bottom of the mountain there. Okay, let's see. I'm gonna try to clean this section up a little bit so it gets a bit sharper. So I'm gonna mix another dark color here with Prussian blue and a bit of black. And then I'm just gonna come back and kind of clean these edges up. Then I'm gonna add a bit more water. Another reason that I like to put a lot of water in my paint when I'm doing this is because it just feels like it goes on the paper so smoothly, which I like. You know, it doesn't really leave behind any like half painted sections. But if you are gonna paint like this with a lot of water in your paint, I definitely recommend using watercolor paper. I mean, for gouache in general, I think it's best to use watercolor paper, but when you're doing this, the thicker the paper, the better. Okay. So now I'm gonna kind of take this and come back around to these parts and sort of re-outline them. My hand's a little shaky right now. And again, like these parts, I feel like when you're looking at a mountain, like there's very clear areas usually that are in light and in shadow. And it tends to be, from what I've noticed, like the bottoms of the mountains where the other mountains come in front, there's usually a shadow. And then in this case, because I'm painting, you know, a sunset, sunrise, whatever you want to call it, but there's no actual sun in it. So, you know, the light is either coming from behind or it's down far enough that the tops here will also be in shadow. Okay. So now what I'm going to start doing is I'm going to kind of start shading the different areas. So I'll do the same kind of process for each one, but use a slightly different color because each one of these hills is kind of in a different area in relation to the light. So to start with, I'm just going to take a little bit of the lighter color here. I'm going to make it also look like some snow's gathered down here. And for this, I want my brush to be pretty wet because I like the effect that you get when you blend colors this way, especially when I'm doing mountains. Like I kind of just come in and let's see, I want that to be a bit more black. But yeah, I'm not super like exact with this type of blending. Like I kind of just let the water do the work for me here. And it'll create a really nice effect there. And then with this one, I'm going to try to add a little bit more dimension as well. Maybe add a shadow kind of towards the bottom here. I'm not super exact with my color mixing either. I just kind of do it till it looks right to me. But this particular palette, I find it's easier to work with values when you're only working with a certain, like a very limited amount of colors. You know, here I'm just really using Prussian blue and white and black. So it's kind of just different shades and tints of that Prussian blue. Gonna add that in. Okay. Now I'm just going to kind of like sweep some of this in to give it some texture. And I'm going to come back here later to sort of clean it up. And again, I like to keep these lines, like the shadow lines at the tops of the ridges, pretty clear. But often when I'm painting, they get covered up and then I have to come back and redo it a little bit to keep it sort of sharp. Okay. So for these hills down here in the front, for the shading on those, we're going to mix a pretty light color. Because again, I'm trying to create the effect of snow there. So I'm going to take some of this light blue like I had earlier, and then just take a touch of this gray and mix it in, and we'll see how that looks. So then for like to create the shading, I just start at the bottom here, and I just sort of like sweep it on. Let's see, it's a little dark for what I want. Because I want it to look like snow. Yeah, that looks good. And then I try to keep it like kind of just on the bottoms here. And then I'll come back to the top part of the mountain with some lighter blue. It's mostly white here that I've got. It was just like a tiny bit of blue that was left from the paint water. Yeah, so then it looks like it's brighter on the top and a little darker on the bottom. So I'm going to use for this one a pretty similar shade, maybe a little bit darker because of the positioning here. Like this ridge is in front of this ridge, so it'll create a shadow. So we'll make it just a tiny bit darker, but not by much. Sometimes I just like to add like one or two little like strokes of the darker color and then come back with my brush and kind of blend it all together like that. Yeah. And then especially along the bottom here, like where the mountains meet the yellow ground down here, I like to make that a little bit darker because there definitely will be a shadow here. Yeah. I'm gonna add a little more. So I can do the same for this one. I'm gonna leave this one mostly white though, I think. Just a tiny bit of, or that light blue, not quite white, but snowy. I'm gonna blend it so it looks like this. Okay, now we can move up to these hills here and sort of mix like a darker color. That's a bit too dark because, you know, you want it to look like a shadow, not just like a random block of color. So the relationships, you kind of have to like, yeah, see how that looks better. Like it's not quite as drastically different from the color of the mountain that we blocked down at first. Yeah. Oops, got a little white on there. But now I want it to be, no, it's not quite dark enough. And then on this side too, and I try to like keep my brush strokes so they follow the general shape of the mountain, you know, because the mountain will come around, like it comes up this way and then it comes back down this way, and these are the sides. So I kind of like, instead of just sort of randomly putting it in, I try to follow that shape. Yeah. Then we'll do the same thing over here. And I especially like to make it like particularly dark right above where this dark line of the other ridge sits. Like not quite as dark as this, but I like to put in pretty dark paint there so that it really gives the effect that there's a shadow there. Okay. Now, let's see. I'll come and do this last little one here. See, I'm doing like this, the same as I did with that other ridge, kind of coming at it this way and then coming at it this way. All right, and then I'm going to put just a little bit more water on my brush. Not a ton, because I don't want the colors to blend all the way together, so it's all just like the same smooth color. I like having this kind of rough texture, because I think it helps to give the effect also that there's trees on the mountains. Okay, I'm just going to darken this a little bit. All right. Now, like I said, this ridge, I've painted it in a little bit too dark here, so I'm going to lighten it up because I like, in comparison to each other, this two parts here to be a little darker. So I don't want to add like too much. I don't want it to be really light. But generally, if you just take like a little bit of a lighter color here and then a lot of water, it'll do the trick. Yeah, there we go. And then I'm also going to darken those a little bit more so they stand out and it doesn't all just look like one like block there. You know, I want them to be distinct from one another so you can tell this mountain's in the front, these sort of canyons are in the back. Okay, so then this section, I'm just gonna clean it up a little more. Here, I'm trying to kind of create the effect that like snow is like sliding down the side of the mountain here, but you can still see the bits of land and rock peeking through a little bit where there's no snow. Okay. All right, now I'm gonna do that darkening part that I was talking about. So I'm gonna get a lot of black on my brush, a little bit of Prussian blue, but mostly I'm just gonna do it black here. I'm gonna just kind of sweep that in. And I'm not gonna cover all of it actually here. I'm just gonna kind of like put in some lines sort of like that. I find that layering really with gouache helps to create the effect of light like partially passing through an object, because you know when you're looking at a mountain, especially in Colorado, for example, they're covered in snow often, but parts of them also have trees or like, I don't know, little rocky, craggy bits that stick through, and sort of like layering like this, just like, I don't know, it sort of helps to create the effect that some light is passing through to some parts and then some isn't. Okay, so I'm gonna do the same kind of thing here. All right. Now the next thing that I'm gonna do is to make these two parts stand out a bit more, like I was talking about. I'm going to mix, I'll probably just use like this same kind of light blue. Maybe I'll add a little bit more white into it because I want this part to look pretty snowy. I've got a bit of black on my brush. I need to get that off. Okay. Oh my gosh, I just dipped it right back in the black. All right. So yeah. It doesn't have to be pure white again. Yeah, we'll see how that looks. And then what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna try to like make it look again like snow is sort of coming down the mountainside here. Like there's some snow that's gathered up in this little corner. So I'm just gonna make some little lines and again follow the sort of shape of the mountain here. I don't know if any of you all have ever spent extensive time in big snowy mountains, but when it starts to melt, it kind of it usually creates sort of a swirly pattern, like really wavy bits. Like I'm gonna do the same over here, kind of just like have it. Need a bit more water. I'm just gonna follow the shape so it looks like it's kind of going into a little canyon thing again here. Yeah. Okay. So let's see. Now what I'm gonna do is get some white, pretty light color. Again, because I want it to be snowy. Maybe I'll keep it a bit lighter than these hills here, but not by much. And then I'm just gonna start filling in these areas that we left white earlier. Because again, like if you just put white paint on white paper, it doesn't look like much. But then if you've got this sort of like off-white, light blue background, and then you layer white onto it, it really makes the white pop. So it'll really look like there's snow clinging to the mountainsides here. And then I'm going to do the same thing here. Just going to kind of come in and sweep it. My paint here is still a little bit wet, so some of this Prussian blue might get mixed in, but it doesn't really matter. Yeah, and you can keep it kind of uneven on this part. So again, it looks like snow because when snow is melting, it doesn't look even. It's sort of all over the place. Okay. So the next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start adding in texture, especially to these hills here. Like you can see in this version, I've added some texture so it looks like trees.
Okay, so, before you start that, would you mind holding it up, holding the sketchbook up so we can see a close-up just to see how you are right now?
Yes.
Okay.
Cool. Yeah.
Thank you.
Of course. So for this, it's going to be kind of similar for how we created the shadows. Like I don't want to use the darkest possible color on these because it's snowy and I want to kind of keep it similar to that. So I'm going to mix something a little darker than how I've done the shadows, but I don't want to keep it too dark. Let's see, that's not quite dark enough. And also with the trees, when I'm doing this, I like to do it in kind of a few layers. Like I'll start with maybe a medium sort of shade. I still don't have that one the right color. Try this. Yeah, there we go. And then I have this this liner brush here, which let's see, it's got a really fine tip on it. So I just like there's like a little bit sticking off, and then I just very, very gently kind of sweep it over like this. And when I'm doing this, I really don't want too much paint on my brush because I want these marks to be kind of like just very little and thin. Yeah. And so here too, generally I like to put more trees down by the bottom of the mountains. And I'm only going to put trees on the bottom few hills because like in Colorado, the tree line, especially where I was living in the San Luis Valley, like the mountains really don't have to be super tall because the land's already at a high elevation before the trees will stop growing. I think the tree line, I want to say it's at 11,000 feet most places there. And where we lived, it was already at 9,000 feet. So then if you put a mountain on top of that, it really does not have to be too tall before the trees stop going. Okay. Yeah, and again, I'm not going to put them all over the whole mountain. Like I'll probably, let's see, we'll put them on this side. I don't know if you can see over my hand, and then leave this section kind of blank. Then I'm going to use the same color over here on this one and do the same. Just little tiny. And again, this it really doesn't require much precision. So you can do it kind of quickly if you want. Though I will say the first time I did this painting, the original one, it probably took me like 4 or 5 hours because I hadn't, figured it all out. I was kind of just doing it as I went, and I was really focused on the detail, which I tend to do when I'm painting. I just don't know when to stop adding detail on.
I'm pretty sure that's a universal artist issue.
Yeah. Just don't know when to stop, and it's never finished. Okay, so now I'm going to take a slightly darker color. Here, like I'm just going to get a little bit more of that. I'm just going to go over the same thing and kind of add, oh, not quite dark enough. Yeah, there we go. And I'm not going to do like quite as many here. I'm just going to add them in a little bit. So it just kind of gives the trees a bit more depth and dimension. You know, it makes it look like some parts are in shadow, some parts aren't quite as in shadow. I'll do that here as well.
And Lily, to let you know, we are at 30 minutes.
Okay. Getting close. Yeah, and then for this part, I'm just gonna mix slightly darker and do the same thing. Kind of just sweep the trees in there. Okay. And some over here. And on some hill faces, I like to cover the whole thing with trees just to kind of give like a bit of contrast in some areas. So this hill, I'll put trees all in the whole thing. Okay. So you can kind of imagine what we'd be able to achieve with a bit more time and stuff like that. Like you can just keep adding in the layers with these trees until they've got enough depth there. But for now, I think I'm just gonna stop the trees there. And then the final thing I'm gonna do is I'm just gonna add in a few more snowy details. So like at the top of this mountain right here, just gonna add some snow that's following the ridge line. And then I'll have it come down a little bit. All right. So there you have it.
Wow. Can we get a close-up, please,
yes,
to see the finished one?
Yeah.
Very cool.
Yeah, here's a version that I did earlier of the same painting. It's funny, I painted this one about, I don't know, 10-ish times in the past week, and each version turns out slightly different.
Yep, that makes sense. Okay, so we had our mountain demonstration, and then in your mini workshop, which is on Sunday, October 9th at 2:00 p.m. And if you can't make it then, there's a recording, so you can watch it anytime you want. But in that mini workshop, you're going to do the entire mountain scene. That's correct?
Yes, I will. So I'll be painting, I gotta flip my sketchbook, something more in this color palette, so I can hold it up so you can see it a little bit better, but with more greens and blues. Oh, got a little bit of a shake there. But instead of just painting, today I just painted this element of the mountain. I will be doing the whole scene. So there'll be like some grass, some foliage, and I'll show you how I do the sky as well to create a complete landscape.
Awesome. And I just realized, thank you, Alan, I said the date wrong. It is Sunday, October 10th, I was getting excited. I wanted it to be a day earlier. So we do have a minute or two for some questions. So audience, if you have any questions, type them in the chat and I will start with one. How did you get started with gouache? How did you pick gouache?
Well, I hadn't been painting for a super long time, but I was mostly using acrylics, and then I just found myself really frustrated with trying to blend them, and I had an idea for how I wanted the paint to go on the paper. I wanted it to be smooth. And then I saw other artists on Instagram. I kind of just started getting into art there, and they were all using gouache, and I was like, I'm gonna try that out. And since then, I haven't gone back. I actually don't know if I've painted with anything other than gouache since I started using it.
Yes, excellent. Okay, so I'm going to put, let's see, what do we have? All right. Lily's mini workshop is on Sunday, October 10th at 2 p.m. The link is in the chat one more time because I know you guys want to do those green mountains. Do you have a preferred brand of gouache?
I use Mia Art's Hemi gouache,
Okay.
and I really like it. Though to be fair, I haven't tried a lot of the gouache on the market, but I tend to like Hemi because it's quite affordable. You get a pretty good set for like $20, and I've found it goes on the paper really nice. The opacity is nice, and they've got good colors. Though I know a lot of people like Winsor and Newton gouache. That one's pretty high quality.
Okay. And do you ever use colored pencil to add details?
Sometimes I do. I haven't much in the past, but recently I've been seeing a lot of artists do that, and I love the effect, and I've been trying that out more in my sketchbook in the past few weeks.
Cool. Do you ever mix gouache and regular watercolor?
Occasionally I've done that, but usually I just work with gouache. I'm not as experienced with watercolor, but I do sometimes like to use it for like to create the sky, for example, if I want it to have a more translucent effect.
Yeah, I wonder if you could use watercolor pencils on the gouache to see how that would work out.
Oh, I should definitely try that.
I think I might go try that too. That sounds interesting. Well, everyone, I do hope you enjoyed your time with Etcher today. Please tell us how we did. Follow the link in the chat. Let me put it there for you to complete our feedback survey. It's helpful, and we are always looking for ways to improve your experience with Etcher. We have these live demos regularly. I'm going to throw in the link one more time for Lily's mini workshop, Sunday, October 10th, 2 o'clock in the afternoon Eastern. And if you can't be there, there will be a recording and you can have access to it at any time. Lily, I appreciate you so much, and I learned a lot from you. I hope everyone has a wonderful afternoon. And before we go, leave us a comment and tell us if you have experience with gouache and watercolor together, or if you have ever used watercolor pencils on gouache. We'd like to know. So pop that in the comment and then join our Facebook family, and Lily could give you some feedback if you did anything based on her workshop today. All right, everyone, have a wonderful day. Until we see you again, make more art.
Bye. Thank you so much.
Is that nice?